Hi, I'm TJ Waters. Welcome again to Agents of Influence. A few years ago, a friend of mine asked me to meet with his company's senior leadership. He described how a competitor was taking market share away from him. The competitor was so aware of what their firm would do, their reaction often slightly preempted this firm's initial act. It was obvious they had a competitor with a top-notch intelligence program. It reminded me of my college days. I'd studied several martial arts in college and even fought competitively on the local circuit. What's so funny? Oh yeah. Alright, it's a little bit funny. Anyway, I offered what I thought was a compelling evaluation about my friend's competitor. I said, they can win with a wooden sword. The wooden sword reference is to the great Japanese swordsman and strategist Miyamoto Musashi. Born in 1584, he was one of the last great samurai. At the age of 30, he was undefeated in over 60 individual contests, most of which ended with his opponent's rather unpleasant death. Around 1612, Musashi stopped using steel swords altogether in favor of wooden, individually crafting a new one for every opponent. After accepting a new challenger, Musashi would spend weeks searching for just the right local tree. He would then measure and consider every branch until he intuitively knew the right one to cut. Finally, he would reverently carve, shape, and finish a perfect new sword. He would then learn that sword, practicing feverishly, hours stretching into days and then into weeks, before he was finally, at last, ready to receive his challenger. He carried on like this for 30 more years, undefeated, killing the majority of his opponents. Miyamoto Musashi retired in 1643, his victories chronicled in villages throughout Japan. In the weeks before his death, in 1645, he wrote a manuscript entitled A Book of Five Rings, one of the greatest works about strategy ever put into print. It is required reading in Japanese business schools and is timely for commerce today as it was to combat in the 16th century. Musashi tells his readers to spend their time and energy learning about the competition. If you know how and where a competitor will strike, you will soundly defeat him every time, regardless of any technical advantage he might have. That is the power of a wooden sword. It didn't take him weeks to find the right tree, the right branch, or the right carving techniques. A simple broom handle would have been more than sufficient. Musashi spent all those weeks learning about his competition. Whom have they defeated? How did they do so? What strategies did they follow based on clan, region, and combat experience? Through careful study, he identified his opponent's weaknesses, and in those private familiarity sessions with his new sword, he would insert openings into his defense to elicit his opponent's weakest techniques, the ones he wanted to be assailed with. In the actual duel, he waited patiently until he recognized the beginnings of his opponent's ill-chosen technique, and now with weeks of practiced muscle memory, he would unleash his explosive countermove. Most of his opponents never realized they'd been manipulated. Clearly, my friend's competitor knew how to do this as well. They picked their battles carefully. They knew which products to promote and which to let slip quietly into obsolescence. Can your firm do that? Can you learn to take advantage of your competition's weakest points? Would you know the weakest points if you saw them? Most companies don't. And as Musashi proved 400 years ago, with information like that, a wooden sword is a lethal weapon. I'm TJ Waters. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.